it's very hard to say, like, why can't people be open-minded, right? Or I wish everyone would seek truth when all our devices are leaning and sort of pushing us towards addiction and towards very polarized thinking. Like meme culture doesn't provide nuance. And in these complicated times, we like simple solutions. So the people that I know who are really thinking deeply, but they have to make this effort. I turn my phone off at night. I try not to look at it in the morning when my brain's in a meditative state, but you really have to go after that. It's not like they're just teaching this to everyone and lightening the algorithms all at once. Each new release, I feel like it's harder to look away. I dream of more openness and more critical thinking, but this is not currently where society's headed.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast, episode 119. In this episode, I speak with deep tech entrepreneur, Kate Lynch. This was a phenomenal conversation, to say the least. Kate is absolutely brilliant, and I cannot wait for you to check it out. To watch this episode, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thesamdeverpodcast. To listen to this podcast, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Here's my conversation with Kate. Well, Kate Lynch, welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, this is a real pleasure. And like I was talking to you before we started rolling, I heard one of your talks lately, and I was about negotiation. And I'm like, oh, and I knew we were podcasting when I'm like, oh, this is going to be great.
Shit gets nerdy with me around.
Yeah. And I met you, what was it? Probably 7 months ago.
I think was it when I was on an AI panel for X Prize?
It was in Venice. We were at Venice. And that's where you actually have to give you thanks and credit for connecting us with Michael Masucci.
He's a legend, man.
He's a legend. And boy, was that a fun conversation.
Yeah, he's very profound and provocative. And there's a lot more to him than meets the eye. There's a lot. Everyone can be a genius in some area if they cultivate it. I'm one of those believers. But he has genius in multiple areas, and he synthesizes information in a way that most people don't. So every time you leave any type of experience with him, you feel like you look at the world a little bit differently. And in life, that's like a big goal of mine, obviously, besides, technology and building a future for every type of person to belong in, is how can I be changed? I don't want to be rigid in politics or ideas of technology. I know there's a lot of stuff that I probably think now that will alter once I get more information. And we have to be flexible and agile as humans. And I love people who might challenge some of my views and unlock you. Great art can do that, right? Interesting technology. So my goal is to constantly evolve and change and hopefully synthesize information in a way that's more powerful to lead to, a better goal for everyone.
Have you always had that perspective?
Potentially. I would say that as a child, I struggled talking to children. I like talking to adults about profound topics. And generally, little kids didn't want to talk to me about those things. And I'll also say part of it is I got treated like an adult by my parents. So that might be some of my mom's crib reading was not children's books. It was Wall Street Journal and New York Times. Because she was like, if I'm going to have to read to the kid, I might as well read something I want to read, right?
It's actually pretty smart.
Yeah. So she was like, all right, 2 birds with 1 stone, right? So that was my nice bedtime reading.
Wow. Well, no, I asked that because, wow, like I love how you just worded that just there, because can you imagine if the world had that perspective? If everyone's like, hey, let's not judge each other right away and think all emotionally about everything. And like, what's the information?
But that's very hard because, one, emotions are contagious, right? There's all this neuroscience about emotions being contagious. And when we start getting into things like social media and algorithm, outrage is what makes things clickable, and which also trains humans to be more in outrage and to produce content that induces outrage. So part of this sort of attention economy meets surveillance capitalist economy, which is like the lowest common denominator for humanity. It reinforces sort of this negative behavior. So I don't want to say that it's not that people don't try. We're all given these beliefs, right? As a child, like what your parents believe, whatever religion you grew up in, what your society was at the time, how a teacher treated you, right? We have our own limiting beliefs on how we color experiences, which things may not be true or may be true. And if we're, like truth is sort of, obviously an elusive thing. But right now we're at this time where people's, amygdalas have been hijacked. And so it's very hard to say, like, why can't people be open-minded, right? Or I wish everyone would seek truth when all our devices are leaning and sort of pushing us towards addiction and towards very polarized thinking. Like meme culture doesn't provide nuance. And in these complicated times, we like simple solutions. So the people that I know who are really thinking deeply, but they have to make this effort. I turn my phone off at night. I try not to look at it in the morning when my brain's in a meditative state, but you really have to go after that, right? You can't, it's not like they're just teaching this to everyone and lightening the algorithms all at once. Each new release, I feel like it's harder to look away. So I don't know. I dream of more openness and more critical thinking, but this is not currently where society is headed.
Wow, this is off to a great start. This is no, I'm smiling because I love how you worded like this isn't the lowest common denominator, what you said. And I'm tying this in because I know you're coming on. We're going to talk space and things like that. I stumbled upon, it was what it could look like in the next 1,000 years going to Mars. And just took myself there and watched. It's like, these are the possibilities. And I'm like, why aren't we doing that? Like, we're concentrating on all this other, like you say, lowest common denominator of our potential, where it's like, man, what if we put this energy and this brilliance toward doing things like that? And that, it really opened my mind just to like think about that for a second. That's why I was curious. I'm really excited.
The future, yeah. Like what if we all banded together and built a beautiful future? So that's a complicated answer because one of it has to do with our biology and sort of, our emotions sometimes don't feel logical. And we do have this need to survive. We do have fear, fight or flight. And when we're living in a fear-based system, and fear is also contagious, this is, it's hard to be creative and innovate. So often what fuels innovation is kind of war. Or like if we spend all the time we do on war, on building technology, where a lot of our great technology actually comes from war, which is, in defense, artificial intelligence, that's defense, right? GPS, that's defense. It's kind of thinking humans to remake a little bit of their biology and have to fight against it. So that's complicated. But I do think that there are these beautiful possibilities. And that's what I like to think about is, do we want to build technology that enslaves people or enhances people and has sovereignty, right? If you can kind of go back, I don't know if you know what MK Ultra is.
I know about it.
Yeah, so sort of mind control experiments our government did. And I'm not going to get too woo-woo, but I just listened to a great Lex Friedman podcast.
I love Lex. I love Lex.
I generally love Lex, generally. And he was talking about all, MK Ultra. They did discover you could get people to kill people, not remember it. And I was thinking about like, what is this lineage all the way to TikTok, where people are kind of the addictive algorithms that can get them to believe things that are against their nature. That's one side of technology. And then the other side of technology, not that, is how can we use AI to enhance us, not to enslave us, right? Not to have these addictive algorithms, but to make us even more super. And to make the best parts of humans, right? Hope, love, community, like those be embraced and, really unleash technologies in this way that's not about sort of that, again, that attention economy, surveillance capitalist state, because again, the bottom lines rewards that. We have a society that's a little complicated with what technology is rewarded. So when you always need to, when you have a public company, your job is to the shareholders, not necessarily to humanity. Some people do both. And so if your job is to make more profit and more profit and more profit, generally making things incredibly sticky and addictive, why would you not do that if you're trying to make more profit, more profit, more profit? So I don't know. It's a complicated system about how our monetary system is set up and how corporate governance is done.
Do you think, and there's so many things we can unpack from that, but start with social media. Do you think there's any good from it overall? Or do you think just because you are right about the TikTok thing, and I get sucked in myself.
I've never been on TikTok. So.
Probably, yeah, good for you.
Yeah, but I know people find meaning in online community, things like LinkedIn or X or other things. Obviously, I love, a good YouTube tutorial on some cutting edge technology. That's always fun. The issue is more that we have to be so strict to regulate ourselves to not, get stuck in that, because the more we're in that world of immediacy, the harder it is to kind of open up and see this like creative future and get into deep thinking, which is that when you don't have outside distractions. And not that I particularly agree with these people's, politics or ideas, but Eric Schmidt, Henry Kissinger, they wrote a book on AI a while ago, and they said it's going to be like people are all in on this sort of like centralized system, and those who try to go off grid. But he did point out that it was going to get rid of the deep thinking and kind of go to more to the mind of immediacy.
And they were predicting that decades ago then.
Yes. So if you read any, since you're an artist, right? Sci-fi, this is where a lot of these ideas come from, that what this future means and sort of lessons we can be cautious about. So I think, this future has been imagined many times over in the past. And there's always been a fear of automating people out and machine. And I think the internet and computers and artificial intelligence aren't like the Industrial Revolution, as some people would like to say, oh, we'll always find more jobs. This is the first time you have like something that can be smarter than us that also has access to autonomous weapons. So I don't know. It's like what the future is. I think there's some people who are very afraid. As Michael's friend, Michael worked with Lynch, one of the top cybersecurity people, on something called Meta Wars, and how this was going to be like much more addictive and totalitarian. And great, that future exists. I try to focus on, I'm aware and cognizant that this world exists, but I don't want to be upset by it, right? You can't make peace by hating war, because hate is a sort of this dark, like a more negative emotion, right? So what I try to focus on, what are the things that I can build for a nice future, something that I would love to live in that also isn't right now the futures, and not that the people building the future aren't incredibly brilliant, don't want to put them down, but it's by men for men. And so we need other types of people getting funding, other types of people building technology, because, otherwise it's one-sided. And again, having that flexible, open mind, we can't fully understand how systems interplay. There's a great book called Hidden Life of Trees. And in Hidden Life of Trees, all of a sudden you realize trees have memories. They can scream. They can, if another tree in the system doesn't get enough sunlight, they can give it food, right? And if we're just understanding this, we claim we can create AGI or ASI, and yet we don't fully understand how our natural systems work because we have these limited minds. Granted, we're trying to expand them, but we don't have this full understanding of systems. So if you have the future being built by one type of person for a type of person, you're going to be leaving out a lot of information, like our ancient technology and the ancient systems, right? Human body is an ancient technology.
Wow. Yeah. No. Just going on another journey, just to go to the Egyptian times and things like that. I don't know. Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson. Do you ever follow any of those guys?
Not deeply, no.
Not deeply, but a lot of there are so many different technologies that we may not even be aware of that they had thousands of years ago.
I would agree.
And I'm with you
Yeah.
with the human body thing. I think that's one thing that gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
And how it interacts with electricity isn't always great. There's a good book called The Invisible Rainbow, which actually talks about our body as electricity,
I
which
got it
like.
over here. It's somewhere.
Ah!
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, when we're thinking of systems, that's, one system that often we build things without being aware of.
And I love what you said, because it's so funny you said that, because a lot of people do say that, well, the Industrial Revolution happened and we had to change the way we did things. But I agree with you. It's like, well, this is kind of different with AI. It has the ability to do so many different things and replace so many different
And
jobs.
I think more robots are going to be around than humans in like the next 10 years.
So what's your overall take on AI? Like, what's the ways where it can really help us out? And then what are the ways, maybe the way we shouldn't go with it, in your opinion?
Genie's already out of the bottle, but
Okay.
Some of the stuff with AI, I'll give some use cases on both sides, right? So I'll start with positive things like discovery of, new cures or deeper understanding of the human body or nature. That's really beautiful. When you have things like AI deciding your case, like in China, that becomes a little more problematic. Or people love to use now ChatGPT as truth, but it was trained on the internet, and often it can give false answers, right? You type in one of my co-founders, it says he wrote all these papers, he didn't write, and like it completely paints him as somebody else, right? So I think the issue with large language models, one, they're trained on the internet. So what's on the internet? Well, there's a lot of porn and cat videos, and also like what is truth, that gets very complicated. So image generation becomes problematic. Like I have something called the Female Funders Club, which is women who invest in technology, trying to get more women to have power and be on cap tables. And we were just trying to like, all right, let's get a female investor. And it made them look incredibly young and like super sexy. Like, is this like a cover of like a softcore porno? like this is, I know like maybe one or two female investors look like that, but the majority do not. Like trying to get them to look a little older. You have to like, it's natural, inclination was to make it like really bangable, right? Like, and this is like the like image generation, the woman must be bangable. And again, like what is it trained on? So this is kind of problematic, or it's very problematic. How data is labeled is problematic. I think large language models are based on lambda calculus, which is sequential, not concurrent. So without concurrency, it's going to be much more energy intensive. And also garbage in, garbage out. So there's great things that AI can do. It can simplify processes, but I think truth is going to become even harder to find out, because if we even look at, did you read about the Twitter files?
Is that where the government and
censored?
I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Social
I don't know
media.
All the details. Yeah.
But I would look into that, because that's a really good like example of what truth is, right? And so anything that was a different opinion than they wanted to be truth, they did not allow out. And it's not like that we haven't been like this for a long time as societies, that we kind of, like there's certain truths people don't want out. But I think that takes away sovereignty and decision. And I think that there was a lot of great information that was not allowed out that might have also changed people's lives, for the better. Just be open-minded. So I'm not in also within news, right? You kind of have two news, like two extremes, and I don't know. Like, I just don't watch the news. That's like, I have people that are upset all the time. They watch it. I'm like, I don't know, read some news, limit it to 15 minutes in the morning, and then go on and have a great day. Like right now, everyone's really upset about the election. And the more I'm in anger, the less I can create. Right. So like, I'm actually, whoever wins, I'm going to be fine. Right. This is not the end of the world. I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. And we can't let, whether technology is being used in a dystopian sense or in a positive sense, we have to make a commitment to what we want to bring forth in the world. And energy is powerful. So, I don't know, don't get caught up in the hype. It's much harder, easier said than done.
And you are right, going back to what you said earlier, like you have to really make an effort to train your mind this way.
This is like the ultimate like training, right? Like you thought you really have to like consciously level up and study biology and understand how it's being hacked, right? Because right now there are teams of experts at a lot of big tech companies and even smaller ones figuring out how can we hack their biology, right? Like that's the point.
I've never heard it put that way. You're exactly right. That's what they're doing. They're hacking in. Because I remember it was called The Social Dilemma. It was on Netflix, I believe, about just how social media is overtaking everything. And they talk about how, I don't know which company it was, but the social media companies, they're trying to do the same thing as the slot machines do in Vegas.
Oh, yes.
Those dopamine hits, those likes, those, notifications. Like, ooh, I got another one. I got to check it. Got another one. It's like the same wiring.
Yes.
To your brain. And they even talked about how some of them don't even let their kids get on social media because they know what it's doing.
Steve Jobs certainly didn't let his kids have access to iPads. It's like, the drugs are bad if you won't give it to your own kids, right?
Oh,
like,
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. A lot of actually tech CEOs don't let their children have devices. It's generally said don't do it until they're 16. But, yes, this is a problem. Are there good things about social media? Again, yes. I don't want to paint things black or white. There's nuance to everything in life.
Yeah.
It's and again, that's either I don't want to fall into this evil good paradigm. I don't think that's helpful.
Well, and just one comment on I won't even go into details, but with the current political situation, for example, you go on X or wherever, one column says this is what's happening. This is exactly how it's going down. Then you go over here. This is what's happening. This is I'm like, these two, like, literally, they fully believe it too. Like both fully believe, but except where's the truth in it?
Or maybe like what's happening isn't either of those things altogether.
Right.
Maybe which I won't go into camera. Off camera, we can have that conversation. Sure. But who has power? Where power is selected? What does it really mean? And what types of power people actually have versus like what's going on? I think power is a lot more complicated than people imagine.
Jared Lanier, are you familiar with him? I have his book over Top 10 Reasons to Delete Your Social Media Accounts. The number one thing I took from that book is when he explained, like, look, whatever your beliefs are, whatever they are, if you believe this and they see that you really like that, they're going to be feeding you that. If you like this over here, they're going to be feeding you that. So it develops into your mind. So now you see this person in real life, like enemy, like
I know.
So you are completely correct on the hacking of biology and the mind and the way it goes deep.
Yeah, it does go deep, but there's also a great movement of people really coming together to think, how can we build this sort of positive techno future, right? Not this sort of dark world or conglomeration of resources, right? I think Bitcoin is very exciting because right now we know inflation is a huge problem. Most people actually don't know what money is. I highly recommend reading, even if you don't believe with all the politics aside or the ending, don't worry about that. Just read Creature from Jekyll Island and figure out who architected our dollar. Who gets bailed out and what is it really? Because inflation is actually because we print this money and it's backed by nothing. Well, it's backed by our military. But this is one there. If you don't have scarcity or something backed by something, the more you print, the people who initially get the money make more, and then it goes down, and then inflation will go up. An example of this is cost of houses have generally stayed around the same in the cost of gold, but not in dollars. They just shoot up, shoot up, shoot up. So I think it's really important. Part of sovereignty or living in a great tech future is understanding what money is, because if you don't awaken to that game, it's going to be hard to get out of like the lower rat race. And I do think that this is obviously with our national debt, this is an issue of national security, is to fix our money problem in America.
What's the name of that book again? I'm going to add
Creature from Jekyll Island.
Okay.
And again, like I said, don't have to agree with all the politics in the book or some of his conclusions, but at least know what money's from. The other book I love on, it debunks a lot of myths on money. It's called Debt, The First 5,000 Years. I read it like 4 times in a row. It's that good.
Wow.
And then there's some other interesting stuff if you want to understand, like also politics and money. More Money Than God. It's a history of hedge funds. Has an interesting twist ending. And also Jim Simons, the man who solved for markets, is also when we're thinking about quantitative finance and as we merge with machine and going into this digital future, what does money mean? I don't know. I think it's important to examine these systems because innovation, technology, money, they're very related.
Adding those all to the Amazon wish list. So aside from money, what's another thing we should be putting our technology toward? Like, I don't know, space.
Well, yeah, I think Earth right now is a closed loop system. And this is something, I also want to credit, I have an amazing CTO, Mike Scardera. And these are things he also thinks, put his life into thinking, and also Gary Hudson. But what does, we do this presentation on why space, because a lot of people, think, oh, let's fix Earth first. So I'm going to give a little overview. Already everything you stream on your phone, that's because of space. GPS, that's space, right? Monitoring our land, the agriculture, natural disaster, that's space. Surveillance, that's space. So Earth, right? We have limited resources here. This is a closed economy. Now, once you bring the cost of launch down, because that's access to space, and you kind of have these sort of customizable spaceships, what happens? Now you have unbounded growth. What if you could 100x the Earth economy or infinitely grow it? You can mine asteroids. Why mine Earth when you can off-world it? You can take manufacturing off-world. And there's certain like R&D you probably don't want to do on Earth, certain things with nuclear, like nuclear propulsion. And you can have, also tourism. And there's things like that only microgravity offers, such as ultra potent pharmaceuticals, or if you have a bad heart and you want to bioprint, use your tissue, bioprint new heart, you can do that microgravity. The reason these things don't exist today is the cost to access to space is too expensive. And the space economy, most people don't realize, is not bound by the Earth economy. So the Earth economy can go like this, but space always goes up.
I never even thought about that, doing certain manufacturing over there that maybe like to reduce pollution, things like that. Would that be an advantage of?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. And also there's just a lot of cool things you can manufacture in space once you get rid of gravity, right? Microgravity is a really cool thing for like, interesting microcrystalline structures. And there's even something we were talking about why space, and, talking about our company, my CTO and I, and he even told us we learned something new, something called disappearing polymorphs, which I won't go into now because that's a whole other rabbit hole. Or wormhole if we're talking space. But yeah, so I mean, it's so exciting. And my CTO also says this really great thing, like, we can't even fathom the technologies we would create once we're off world, because we would have a different mindset, because we would see possibilities differently.
And I want to go back to what you said. Were you saying something about making organs in space or the heart?
Yeah.
What was that? Hey, I'm just curious.
Right now, like, you want to replace something, you might get like a pig's heart or, like an animal's heart. And now they're trying to do some synthetic stuff, but you can actually take your tissue and do something called bioprinting and bioprint your heart. Because in microgravity, it won't collapse, right? So if the cost for launch comes down and you have sort of customizable spaceships to do whatever you want to do, whether it's R&D, other types of medicine, manufacturing, then all of a sudden, let's go up there, let's grow Sam a new heart, and it's with you. So it's not going to reject because it's your own tissue.
So how come you can't do that here on Earth?
Microgravity, right? Because it would collapse if you're growing it. There's also things like organoids, so they create mini organs that they can do tests on in space. But again, cost is what's prohibiting this. Same thing with mining, same thing with tourism. Right now, it's not fully feasible.
So wow, so someone could technically, if this existed, they could get all their organs replicated in space. And so if something, God forbid, happens, like, hey, I need this, order me a kidney, So yeah. Theoretically, that's possible.
Theoretically, yes. All things become possible once cost comes down.
Okay.
Just like cell phones, right? Like if you want, what the super technology is versus what everyone has in their hands now. Just like quantum's very expensive, and there's some things they have to figure out with room temperature instead of having to be at these freezing periods. But I think quantum will, once the technology is nailed and it's able to scale, then cost them down. Because usually it's like what super rich people have it, cost drives down, cost drives down, cost drives down, and then it can be adopted by everyone else.
And I think, I don't know which company, have they done the tours to space yet with anyone? I know like tickets were, I don't know how much.
Yeah, well, it's very expensive. It's going to be like 50, 150 million a flight per passenger is really expensive too. So yes, billionaires can go to space. Virgin Galactic has suborbital flights. I'm not sure how long they'll be around. It's not like a great business model. They spent part of the problem with getting also the other aspect of why space isn't where it should be is that it's very expensive to develop technology, and especially space technology. And who gets the funding? Sometimes it's great people, but sometimes it's people who don't know how to build spaceships, and it's a system, right? So it requires great system engineers as leaders. Otherwise, because how everything integrates. So if you have somebody who only understands propulsion and they don't have a great system engineer in the founding team leading, there'll be a lot of problems elsewhere, and it'll take a lot more money to develop. So it's complicated.
Yeah, it's not, but it is fascinating though. It is. And like I said earlier, it's like, man, what if the world could come together to start doing these things and really putting that effort and energy? I like what you said too. Thought it was very interesting. You know, it's energy when you say, I hate war, like you're still in that hateful energy blocking the creativity, if you will.
Yeah. And it's also, it's complicated with I know I keep saying this world, but with geopolitics right now, because we are a little bit at war with China, but they're our manufacturer. So it's kind of awkward. And we are playing space games. People are like, can't space be this utopian society? Well, space is a reflection of Earth, and all the politics are out there too. And that's not just going to go away. You know, space is already, whether we like it or not, has been weaponized, and who controls the high ground controls the Earth. So that's also going to be another tricky thing. It's in a dream world, people can go set off, create their colony, have like sort of sovereignty, create a new system. But that's not how it is.
And I'm probably butchering this, but in this video I watched, it showed what happened by like the year 3000. After taking you through this timeline, exactly what you just said, as far as no, every country had representation on Mars. So basically it was like kind of like another Earth in a way. You still had your representation of all the different countries. It wasn't just like a free land grab. Eventually, like once then a federation was created, and yeah, so you're right. Like I can see how you're not going to really get away from politics in that sense.
I mean, humans are humans, right? And all, you know, there's a history of what societies win and what societies lose. One, it could be like, for example, like crazy weather patterns can destroy a society. Like, so there was a lot of tribes, you know, in South America that actually El Nino ended up wiping out because, like, you know, thousands of years ago, because when, you know, the weather changes, there's less fish, and then it brings drought, right? And it's raining a lot more in deserts. So weather can wipe species out, but also tech is why people lose wars too. So technological advancements, like, for example, so we had the Sumerians, right? So the Babylonian Empire, there was two, right? But the Assyrians came, and they were a war-charged society. And how did they end up taking over? Well, they just had these chariots, right? And this was an advanced technology. So the advanced technology wiped them out. Or when we're thinking about what happened here, why we actually used to have cities in America, like Native Americans, and actually Peru had older pyramids than Egypt. We forget that we don't really understand our history here, but guns won that out, right? And as we're thinking, I think that paradigm of who can have the more weaponized technology is who's going to be allowed to exist in the future still is a paradigm that exists. I'm not going to be able to change that. You know, like that's just how we are right now. I dream of a world where it would be great. There's no bad actors. We don't need any weapons. But usually historically, whoever was that society ended up getting taken out by another one that did have the weapons. So
have you read Sapiens?
Yes.
I left that book not feeling the greatest, meaning I thought it was a great book, but I'm like, wow, we really haven't changed too much. Technology's changed, but like you said, what's ingrained in us, that conqueror, got to defend, take over mentality, it's still there.
Well, even if you don't have it, others may.
Exactly.
So I don't have the solution for that. I'd rather just build cool technology and feel and spread good vibes and like I don't know.
No, I'm with you.
Like my goal. I started finding myself a while back getting very outraged by things and getting upset, and then it hit me that I was like, wow, that's such a waste of energy. What if I put all that energy of being upset about the way things are into just doing cool stuff and to building stuff I believe in. And I think that would be amazing if we could do more focus on that. But right now, where a lot of the funding does come from is, DOD. That is where a lot of our development is. China, they're throwing lots of money at technology too. We actually are slipping behind due to too much bureaucracy and regulation in America. And also our financial institutions is a little problematic. But anyways.
And I'm sorry, DOD is what again?
Department of Defense.
Of Defense.
Yeah.
And so you're saying it's getting harder and harder to get funding for
well,
things?
I
There's
think
just more red tape or?
Yeah, that's actually a very complicated
Gotcha.
answer. I say that word too much. So again, I'm trying to steer away from the memeable answers because things are nuanced. So maybe that's why I use the word complicated. So one, America, every time they add a regulation, there's nothing to delete a regulation. And maybe it was put there for a good reason. Two, people know about the issues with cost plus contracts. And there's like the prime contractors that often get the money. And they're not incentivized to make things cheaply. They're incentivized to, because you only get like 12%, something like that on top of the contract. So you want it to cost more because that 10 to 12% equals more money. And then they suck up discretionary money. So that's also a complication. Our procurement process is it's filled with red tape everywhere. And so right now, the view is national security has to be funded by private capital. And they're hoping that venture capitalists will do this with startups.
So national security has to be funded by private capital.
Some of it is being funded, in the interior, but I'll give examples. SpaceX and Anduril, they got investor money and sell to the government capabilities. When you have to do little tiny contracts and check all these boxes, it's very hard and slow. But our venture capital money, most of it comes from Saudi Arabia, UAE, some South Korea, some Singapore, and also China. It's kind of like an interesting dynamic.
That's it. I never realized that. So someone like NASA, now is that all government funded then?
So yes, NASA, but what NASA is now is more really good for R&D. And now they've sort of privatized buying out things. The COTS program helped that. Like obviously Apollo was the great big thing that they did, but now they're really great at, exceptionally great at R&D, but they're not really building spaceships in a like lucrative manner.
And I'm just curious, if you're willing to share as little or as much as you want, like your background, what got you into this types of stuff, technology?
My first word was moon.
Really?
Yeah. So I used to want to go outside and I just want to point at the moon and say, moon, moon. I loved the moon and I knew I was going there. So that was part of it. My father, before I was born, had been a fighter pilot. So I used to go to the air shows. He used to stick me in flight simulators, and I loved doing all of that. And I was very excited. I loved and excelled at mathematics when I was young, and I used to think like, oh, I was going to be a mathematician, and I was going to solve chaos theory. Like this was a little dream of mine. Then I kind of like, as most people do, there's a great book by Epstein called Range. You kind of go on this path all over the place. But what made me go all in on technology is I had a lot of things that I saw that weren't being built that needed to be built. And I was talking about it all the time. And I was reading about AGI and different technologies and AI was the big one. And then also getting into blockchain, a little into quantum, all this stuff and robotics. And I was thinking about the convergence of deep tech and what this means for humanity and what this means for an off-world future. And I was like, well, I know how to solve other people's very complex problems. I know how to do deep analysis. I'm a systems thinker. I'm an abstract thinker. And then I also like to create, I have an artist side to me. Why am I just complaining or talking about what should be built? Why don't I just go build the things I see in my head? So instead of, because a lot of us, it's very hard to take responsibility for what you want to exist. Instead of I was at this female founders event. They were having speak on space and how do we get there? And there's this huge disparity, right? Female founders get 1.9% of venture capital dollars, and even though they get 3 times ROI as male founders, 12% unicorns, all the numbers show that they make a lot of money, but people aren't giving them money. And why I try to explain, and what's your piece of advice? Don't expect other people to open doors for you. Because if you have to work, 50 times harder, figure out how to you have to have more connections, then you just have to do it. Complaining out a problem doesn't solve the problem. So if there's something you feel passionate about that needs to be solved, well, that's your responsibility. You can't wait for Elon to make the world you want to live in. Elon's going to make some of it, but there's a lot of other technologies that, maybe don't need to have only that perspective that need to exist. So I don't know, whatever each individual's passionate about. Now, I was listening to the All In podcast, and they said some number, something like 57%. I might be incorrect, so don't quote me on that. Of the Gen Zers want to be influencers for a living, right? That's kind of problematic, but sometimes we have these dreams. What you can, being an actor is not really, it's a winner take all. I think AI will automate out a lot of that. And even 15 years ago, there was this big tech event, cybersecurity, all this stuff. And they said, oh, all art is going to become a hobby, right? Because technology will sort of automate it out. I do think there's a place for it. So if you have a big dream, but that dream doesn't make any money, then what is another thing that you can do with your talent and still get to do that on the side that makes meaningful change to society? Right. So I don't know. I have actor friends say, I never get the roles I want. Why don't you write yourself a role and film yourself doing it? Right. That's one way to get the roles you want, is to create it. Right. So don't say I get typecast as this person. There's tons of students around, or you can even just get cool black and white kind of filter something, do your monologue. So instead of having this mentality, come save me, or somebody else should pick me, please pick me. Please pick me. I want to be the chosen one. Make yourself the chosen one by your actions, because life is a series of habits. So go after whatever's that thing that you find is the gap in society.
I love that. I was telling you, I'm getting into some speaking now, and my thing's called produce your passion.
Ooh, I like that.
Instead of pursue, because it's we're going to pursue it, but produce it you just said it brilliantly. You aren't waiting for permission. You're putting a plan together and executing, regardless.
That has financial feasibility, I should say. Because Cal Newport has a great book. The idea of following your dream is actually probably not the best thing. And the passion hypothesis versus the getting, career capital hypothesis to really do what you want, 2 different things.
And I'm going to be honest, I'll put myself, I've had to come to that even as of recently with stuff. It's it's passion's one thing, but does it pay at the end of the day? And you do have to sit with, you have to be honest. I think you should be able to pursue your passions, produce your passions rather. But then you also got to realize, I do live in a third dimension that requires rent and bills, and yes. Cell phones will shut off if I don't pay them. So
yeah. And also, to your point, it's not that you can't be a brilliant actor and make your own stuff. There's a lot of hours in the day. But there's probably a lot of your skills can translate. How do you convey a convincing story, right? Technology companies always need that complex technology. And other places, right? Story is what drives humanity, right? The history of story. So that's a really powerful art form, and influence and public speaking and motivation. These are all things that you can put into many different careers.
What are some areas, I'm just curious, what are some areas outside space and things like that people aren't paying attention to that there's opportunity there that people could be putting efforts into?
Well, I deeply think about infrastructure, both on world and off world. There's a lot of energy stuff to be solved. And also like where power is coming from. That's kind of exciting. Solving water problems, all the basic needs. What is the basic thing that humans need solved and that humans will always need? And that's great. Like I wish you could. There's a wildfire, push a button, a little like some dome comes over your house. You're safe. We're not in that future, but like I don't know. There's a lot of wild things that still need to be built. We have a lot of problems to solve. So pick one and create. How can you monetize on solving that problem in the smallest increment without having to build the whole thing first? Maybe there's a smaller problem you can solve, but everything needs a solution, right? So that's what humans do. They innovate, they create.
No, I love that. And then as far as, because you're being in the tech scene, are you mainly always here in Los Angeles, or do you travel a lot, going to other cities like San Fran?
Well, it's Orange County, San Diego, and Bay Area, Palo Alto. Yes, Florida for space stuff sometimes, and Colorado Springs, and then abroad travel sometimes. Yeah.
I'm just curious to get your take, because this has been coming up a little too. Like, what is the investor scene like right now?
Dismal.
Okay.
All right. So right now there's a few problems going into where capital is coming from and what it means. So one is when interest rates are really high, LPs, so limited partners. So most people don't realize venture capitalists have to go raise money. And they raise money from LPs, from family offices, from overseas, and then they can deploy that capital. Now they have to deploy the capital in a way that gets return. So they usually hope that a couple of their companies, portfolio companies, will moonshot, and they know most of them will not make money. But what's happened is, again, when you can get more money in a savings account and you don't want to take that risk, then they don't get more investors. Two, America has had a hostile M&A environment, so mergers and acquisitions. That means when a company gets bought, it's very hard to have M&A right now. There's also not a lot of what we call IPOs. It's when a company goes public. So all of this feeds into there's much less capital. I think about half of funds are going to go under. So this means that it's harder to raise money. And there's a lot of people wanting to get into VC, but how do you do that? It's not so. And also there was like a lot of interesting investments that maybe weren't the wisest things to do. So it's a difficult time in investment.
That's it. So a venture, when people say I'm part of a venture capitalist firm, it's not just this person that has $500 million in a bank account. Let me give you money. They're having to pull that from a bunch of different.
Sometimes there's sole source LP. So someone like, let's say you have a family office and you want a fund and you hire some venture capitalists, and you might be there's only one person, giving that money into the fund. That's on occasion, but generally people have to raise money unless it's a corporate venture fund, but they have to go out and raise money from a lot of different people.
So not only does the entrepreneur have to go out there and raise money, but then the investor has to go out
and raise money. Yeah.
That's it. I didn't really ever know that.
A lot of people don't realize that. And it's not that like if they like a technology, it's not just if they like it, can they justify it to their LPs, to their investors, right? And if they made a couple bad investments in one area, they might be hesitant to go do it again, even if they know this one is a really good one, because they have to respond to their investors. And they prefer to have exits. They have to return the money within 7 to 10 years. But if there's no mergers and acquisitions and no IPOs, then how are they getting this huge money return? And sometimes it would take more like 15 years. But the investors want the money back. So if they can't return the money back in the time, then they can't raise their second fund or their third fund.
So you really have to sell it twice initially. You got to sell the venture capitalist person, but then they have to sell it to the group.
Well, they might have like complete discretion, but they're thinking 7 to 10 years from now. They're like, if their fund doesn't make money, they have a lot of questions they need to answer. They're going to have to justify every single one. So they write deal memos on any investment that they say yes to.
Okay, I think a number I got thrown out in terms of angel investors, I heard 1 out of 10, they think. 1 to 2 out of 10 might hit for them. They go in understanding that a lot of these probably aren't going to hit.
Yes, that would be correct. That generally most companies will fold.
Okay. I got a completely left field question, and we can
Sure.
totally, because you just seem like someone that have a good answer to this, but is money necessary in society? Is there a way to do society in a different way where we wouldn't have to have this? Or is there always going to be, there has to be some type of representation, if you will, of
All right.
monetization?
How would you do units of exchange for goods and services that you don't have if it wasn't for money?
You'd have to trade something, barter, right?
Yeah. So barter gets complicated because even when you're bartering within, if you have small community and you can do systems of trust, like they used to do in olden days, and then some societies do now, it is very difficult to get like specific things you want. And so this myth of barter, I don't think exists. Like it is really feasible unless you guys are like, you're living off the grid, you're self-sustaining, everyone chips in potentially that way. But I think you need some unit of measurement to record debt or systems of it. So that's why I like Bitcoin is great. Gold is great. Dollar is problematic right now. Not that I don't love my country.
Now, something, I know Andrew Yang was big on this when he was running 4 years ago. Now with AI coming out and robots and all of this, jobs being taken away, do you foresee a world where we're going to need something like universal basic income for some people, or
Do you think anyone's actually going to give that to people?
probably not?
I mean, I almost feel like, I know like Sam Altman likes to talk, like people developing AI all think you need UBI. Look at our debt right now. It's
huge.
crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know where this UBI money is going to come from, because certainly at the top, they're not sharing it. Like when you're a trillionaire, do you really want to fund everyone else? Because obviously you worked hard and the American dream worked for you. It gets very hard to imagine that not everyone has the same type of opportunity to do. It can be easy to think, well, I did it, so anyone else can. So everyone else should. But that's kind of not how things always work.
Yeah. Well, and I know you said you say you are correct. It's not all black and white, right? Like the gray exists.
Yeah.
You know, but so when people say, no, it's this way or the highway, or no, that could never be true. Well, there's there's exceptions to the rule sometimes.
I think there's a lot of people trying to, if you're interested in going down that route, there's books on what's called parallel societies. And there's a history of it, and also a book called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which goes into more that type of finance. I mean, there's a movement like Derek Bros is a part of it. And again, not suggesting you do this, but there are a lot of people doing things like homesteading and what's his name? Is it John Bush or something? He does he has this big community where everyone learns how to live off the land or create small communities of their own. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they're successful, but you can, if you're curious how you can do it on a small level. I don't think you can do it on a global level. I think that then you get into things like, for example, in China, when you jaywalk, it can, facial recognition can pull it out of your bank account, the fee, and it affects your social credit score. So that's one very centralized version. And there are great things about China too. I don't want to just like poo-poo China. We have certain systems of social credit score in America too. We're just less aware.
Okay. Yeah, no, we've already covered so many incredible topics. Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
What's your favorite animal?
Probably dogs.
Really? What kind of dog?
Labradors.
All right. Well, I like Cavachons a little better, but dogs, I like red pandas. They're my favorite.
Okay.
They're very cute. Okay. Time, money, not an issue. What would you make?
Oh, in terms of content, what I'm doing right now.
Okay. Well, you can almost do that for free. You just need extra time. So you love creating content.
I've always loved creating content. That's always been a passion of mine.
Magic wand, you can do one big change in the world. What do you do?
It's a phenomenal question. I want people to get along. I want people to have this open-mindedness, like we were talking in the beginning of this conversation, where we can have differing viewpoints, but we can talk about it civilized to work toward the greater solution, instead of there being conflict of violence, war, and everything like that.
We agree. Like most people agree on like 99% of things. Everyone wants a good life for their children, if they have children, or their labradoodles, if that's, the happy dog parent. People want security and safety. They want good health care. They want good education. They want freedom of choice and freedom of speech for themselves, not always for other people. But like generally there's these things that everyone can agree on, right? And even if you can't agree on like what's causing climate change, everyone wants green spaces. They want nature to exist. So I think like if we focus on what are the things that we all want and stick with those, then that's helpful. There is I'll have to find his name for you. There was an amazing professor at NYU who taught who taught about propaganda, and he actually got canceled. But how do we notice when we believe something like very radically is when you're really pushing against any differing idea, right? And you really have this inner resistance to not even listen. And we all have forms of propaganda we believe. So if we're going to go to that place, one thing we can do is challenge ourselves and with somebody open. Why don't you like that idea? What happens if you listen to the idea with an open mind? And what is this huge resistance against that idea? Where is it coming from? And come back to like put it back to basic principles, because we all have some of that mumbo jumbo in our brains. Why don't you like that type of person? It might come back to some type of limiting belief or some type of media thing. So like thinking about you're a content creator, right? And you're really passionate about this and you want people to be open and get along. How can you use your content creation to further that goal, right? Because that seems like your mission in life.
That was great. That right there, that's a clip. That right there, Kate Lynch breaking it down like that. Right, you're so true. It goes so deep. Like if you can pinpoint, why am I feeling this? I mean, it comes to that awareness of yourself, right? Like, why am I being triggered by this?
Because you're having the reaction, not somebody else. So this is why I like that compassion, right? In Buddhism, it's like it's not that you have a problem with the person, because everyone and whatever religion wants to say all has that higher potential in them, right? Whatever you believe, everyone has that like pure good somewhere in there. It's your karma with that person. Right? Because somebody else isn't having that fight with that person or being like really upset by that person. That's you. So whatever like negative reactions you have, I get them certain people sometimes. I'm like, oh, this is something I need to work on. Instead of saying like this person needs to work on themselves, this is something I need to work on.
Wow, that's big. Eric, you got anything? You got anything brewing over there?
In Christianity, it's flesh and blood is not your enemy is not flesh and blood. At least, and I interpret that as like it's internal. Yeah. So to me, it almost sounds like what our bigger issue is we got to almost have our minds need to evolve. That way we are more aware of all these things, because we are literally creating our own problems, even though we may say we want these things, these real things, but like our behavior kind of says otherwise, and we're not even aware of it at the same time. So we need to like literally evolve our brains if we're ever going to do any of those things. I think that's kind of what
you need to evolve the brain. What if we want to do like extreme ownership and total responsibility? The environment is a reflection of you, and whatever you have inside is going to be manifest in the outside. And our beliefs have the most profound influence in our life. Just like negative friends can bring us down and positive friends bring us up. What we believe in, if we believe in systems of inequity or certain, like whatever it is you're holding above yourself, it could be an iPhone could be a religion is just a belief system, right? And an object of veneration. So whatever that is that you're holding above yourself, you're giving power over you. And think about what that thing is that you're allowing to have power over you. Because that will definitely warp how you affect, how you interact with every human being is your belief system.
So this is something that's come up a couple of times on this show. I'm curious what your opinion is. Going by that, I would assume that your beliefs also affect the way you see things, you perceive things. So it should affect your truth. So is truth, because we're talking about the truth and stuff like that, I don't think there's absolute truth, but some people are like, well, what's the truth here? It's like, well, how much do beliefs even play into the truth to where it literally is like on some sort of movable scale just based on the way you're perceiving it? Like, what's your take on?
Based on perception. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a great question, because again, truth is complicated. So we filter our experiences with our past experiences. It's not like we go into everything with fresh eyes. And that's also how we simplify compute in our brain. So we don't have to like constantly compute all of that data, right? We use some of this on memory. Also, our greed, anger, and stupidity, our desires, they filter our experiences, right? So you have one situation happen, 10 people each person, right, will see different things because we all are adding our personal experiences in how we compute things. So I don't think that any of us can completely understand what absolutism is, but I think we can be open to new information, and also just because, and examine why you believe something, not just the propaganda, but okay, like media right now, right? Did I believe it just because CNN said it's true, right? And this is what they're telling me. I always think like, if someone like in media, what is their agenda right now? What do they want to happen? Because there's a lot of news stories that don't get reported, and some news stories that do get like reported in a very specific angle. So it's not that this one thing they're reporting isn't true, but they're not telling you about all of this, right? So there might be actually a lot more to the story. An example is, I have a family member, they're very politically on one side. Again, I have no specific political party. And I just said, what if you listen to the words without the media's interpretations? Just listen to their straight words. And what happens to your reaction? No, they're this, they're this, they're this, they're this. I'm like, but listen to the words, not what your favorite talking pundit has to say about it. And that's the hard thing, is that people can elicit emotions in us that might not necessarily be anything about what they're saying. Sometimes, all right, have you ever gotten an email and you were really upset about the email, and then you're like, I'm not going to respond now. And you read it like 2 hours later, you're like, oh my gosh, this didn't say what I thought it said, right? Because you were just in a mood or you didn't sleep well. I mean, that's why biology. And sometimes like the truth is same email, completely different truth with a little time passing. I don't know. It's complicated.
Text messages too. You're completely right about that.
Yeah. So
what someone say once, don't ever respond to an email angry. And I read in a book recently, don't ever make a decision when you're in a valley.
Yeah.
Meaning like if you're
in the valley, because we're the valley.
Just meaning when you're in that heightened emotional state, you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah, you're not creative. And that's also when we're talking about like when you're dealing with other people and you're dealing with conflict, your goal with them is to get them chill so that they can be in a creative solution response, right? Oriented or like a goal.
And you're completely correct about using the example of, the news. Like it may be true, but they're not telling the whole story of it. And I'll admit, I've been sucked in way more than I should have been this past week in some of it, but it is fascinating to watch of just, you're exactly right. They take sound bites and clips. Both sides do it. They take these little things and they just run with that and they amp it up. And people are like, can you believe what so-and-so said? And this is what they said over here. I'm like, well, what actually happened?
This is why I actually don't watch news TV. I read some news. I also discuss with people behind the scenes on things.
Yeah.
I try to look at words.
Sure.
And everyone I know is pretty upset about the election. I don't feel upset at all because I'm not engaged in that media cycle.
Your life and your ventures and what you're doing is going on regardless.
It's going to be different outcome because different viewpoints, a little bit like different challenges from either side. But
yeah,
I'm not going to let the world that kind of thing upset me because I just want to love everybody, and every time I look at somebody as the other, then I'm creating like a sort of division within myself.
Well, I
easier
love
said than done.
Yeah,
I want to say that. Not that I don't get someone like texting at a stoplight and you're just like green lights there and you've been waiting like, like a little bit like asshole, stop texting, right? Of course, we all have things, our weaknesses.
What's funny about LA is too, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, the honk comes so quick. If you haven't gone the second that turns green, be like, it's like barely green.
The new thing I've noticed is people who want to text while drive, sometimes they'll just stop in the middle of the road and not even pull over.
Oh,
This
geez.
has been like something happens. So it's like, because they're very addictive, it's,
Yeah.
you need that hit, right? So.
Yeah. Well, what are, with the remaining time, I was wondering because you seem like a very disciplined, aware person. What are some, I don't know if tips and tricks are the right words, that people can do just to become more aware or just to be more focused, to get more conscious, if you will?
Well, obviously this is not my specialty, but I think, for example, Jim Quick, he has a book called Limitless, and he's got podcasts. He talks about that. If you're really interested in and also Cal Newport has great books on this. As a woman, our bodies function very differently, and generally studies are all done on men. So there's some women who are getting into the neuroscience of female brain, which there's different tricks and tips, but I just say educate yourself on it. And number one tip is sleep is the ultimate biohack. And you don't want to look, if you can, avoid 2 hours before bed, screen time, at least wear red glasses. And if you're watching a movie or sensational, your brain is going to go like this, and it's going to affect your sleep. And then the first hour of the morning, you're in a very suggestive state. Your brain is in a meditative state. That's when you want to do like your, religious practice or meditation or any of that. Because you're very, this is when you're suggestible, and also you can put your intention out into the world for the day. So that's what I would recommend. And if you need to be on social media, maybe just put it not on your cell phone, but on one device that's like maybe not your work device, not this. So you have to really make an effort to go check it, but keep it off your phone. And that might help you going into the endless scroll. I don't know. So I think the cell phone is the big one.
Yeah. No, that's great. And this has been phenomenal. Is there anything else that you had to share, or anything in the future? I know you said you're working on things. Is there anything else you wanted to put out there?
Even though we touched upon some dark topics, it's not to, again, be upset about it. It's good to be aware of these things exist, but I'm going to build this. So I don't, just because there's things that are upsetting, and it's natural, you can have some emotions about them, but and you don't want to suppress emotions, but really thinking about who do we want to be as a species, especially as we merge it with technology, and what do each of us want to contribute? Because when we're living, humans need a mission and a purpose to really succeed. Otherwise, they feel unhappy. So I hope that any of this talk of sort of like surveillance capitalism or the attention economy, okay, that exists. What are the things we want to bring in? How can we deepen friendships and connections? How can we make friends with people of different beliefs? And be okay with maybe opposites, holding to, opposites, and there's a potential that both things can be true.
I love that. That's brilliant. Eric, do you have any final questions?
Yeah. Earlier you were talking about how if you're like angry or in a negative state, you can't create. I was just curious if you talk on that. Like, have you had situations where you were able to use like anger to create something positive? Or do you find like traditionally it's like, 95% or more that you need to be in like more of a positive state for you to be in like a creative state?
Anger can be a motivation, right? So I guess I have to talk that to you, even though I'm answering you. So anger,
you talk to him. You're covered. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So if you're upset with something that's happening in the world, like AI, and you don't like how AI is being built, you would be like, you know what? I'm going to go build something else. But building things, tech has the consciousness of a creator. So if you're building things out of anger or out of victimhood, it's going to be very problematic. It's going to infuse that. So it's not that anger is bad. Anger is just a sign telling us we need to change something or whatever. I like to use, when I have intense emotions, I like to do something creative with it, put that intensity there, and then go into building, positive things. Because I mean, have you ever been around people that are complaining all the time, and then you want to complain? Mm-hmm. And then it's like you're not like focused on like the optimal solution. And rage doesn't get you the optimal solution, but it can be, oh my gosh, I'm very upset about this thing. Well, I need to go do this thing. How can you use it as, this is a sign I need to work on myself or build something else?
That whole 5 people you hang around thing, I think, but more and more becomes true. Like they say,
Yeah.
you're the 5 people you hang around. I mean, give or take, but I do, you do realize being around certain people, that energy, it just sticks. It
Yeah.
can stick to you. I mean, energy is a real thing.
Yeah, I'm real obsessed with just like your self energy. Like if I'm in like a negative state, I'm like, shit, I'm just like perpetuating this. So it's like trying to really take action to get yourself out of that, because otherwise it's real easy to kind of like let it just control the rest of the day, or at least for an hour or two. And you're like, you can actually take a lot of action to get yourself out of it, whether it is just like going to watch something funny or moving, dancing, doing something, just kind of like change your mindset, because the energy will just keep you sucked in, and then you'll keep thinking more negative things, and then the cloud just stays there like all freaking day. Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. You take action against the cloud,
Yeah.
right? Like to dissipate. I like that dancing. Yeah. And I think that it is reframing, right? You can't simultaneously live in fear and gratitude, right? Like feel those emotions. So I try to reframe situations and think like how, what's awesome about this moment? Or it's all winning or learning, right? What can I learn from this moment? And I can't remember what book it was, but this guy talked about, this director, he knew if an actor was going to be successful or not by how they handled rejection. Because you'll be constantly hear no, 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 no. And part of that is like, how do you really have true grit? And so that things cannot go your way, and you just, okay, cool. Oh shit, that happened. Oh well. Or you make a mistake, learn from it. Oh well, instead of lingering on it.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure you can relate with what you do. I mean, when we do this podcast over and over again, we learn something each time. Like, oh, we got to move this here, do this there. It's like, but the only way you get to do that is by doing.
Yes.
Like you just can't sit and just think the whole time. So
yeah,
I love what you said with winning or learning. Like either way, you're going to learn something.
Yes.
And I always say analysis paralysis a lot of times. Like how many ideas just haven't taken action because like, well, when this happens, then I can do it. Or, just that ability just to take that action and fall on your face and be like, all right, that didn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's do this instead.
Yeah, exactly. But that reflection is also, instead of doing the same stupid thing over, I think you're right. Yeah. The reflection is important. And sometimes I say really stupid things. They can be slightly offensive and ill-timed. And I'm like, all right, man, I shouldn't have said that. And I have to, because I just like, I process very quickly, and sometimes it's helpful to take a beat. So I can't beat myself up, but I'm like, well, what can I do next time? Or like I popped off about like something that maybe I shouldn't have to someone who got mildly offended. So then like I got to circle back. And even if I think that person is dick, it might be an important person. So I might write an email saying very positive things about them, even if I didn't love the totality of this conversation. I know I might have said something not that it was like wrong what I said, but it might have been upsetting. And I want good vibes, right? Like Dale Carnegie kind of vibes. I don't need people,
How to win friends and influence people, right?
He's the OG.
I'm just curious, you ever read Napoleon Hill? Read Think and Grow Rich? And
yes.
His other really good one that a lot of people don't talk about, Outwitting the Devil. And you can view it in a metaphorical sense, but it really relates to what we're talking about as far as those voices. There's the little angel and there's the little devil, and you get to choose which one you're going to let fuel you. So,
yeah, which one do you feed, right?
Yeah, and we've talked about this on here where it seems you would think the more you progress in something or get better at something that those voices would completely go away, but in fact, sometimes they get amplified even more sometimes.
Well, that's because you haven't dealt with the limiting beliefs.
Could you
this is like, sorry, this is me popping off. So a lot of things we have limiting beliefs from childhood based on experiences we had and things that the way we interpreted a situation. So there's a way to make those voices softer. And actually they don't have to increase, but that goes back into like, what was the moment in time when I felt this emotion? Because often we're putting like emotions on people that don't really need it, right? Other people aren't responsible for your emotions. You are. So, if there's a voice in your head, maybe it's, I don't know, like, I'm not smart enough. Right. And we'll just take that one, right? If that's the one I'm not smart enough to do this, or I'm stupid, whatever it is. What does that come from? Well, maybe you had a sibling in childhood that told you were stupid, or, a parent or a teacher who scolded you in front of the class for an incorrect answer. And even though it wasn't true that you were stupid, that's just how you interpreted that moment. You can stick that in your brain and make that become your inner truth. So sometimes we have to go back into the past and figure out what is that? Is it true? And reinterpret those situations. So there's some books on this too, and different people specialize in sort of the limiting beliefs. But I knew there was, in order for me to excel at what I wanted to build, there was certain beliefs I had to get rid of about myself and about others. And otherwise, I couldn't like unleash my potential.
Did you have one distinct moment where you had that aha with that, or is it more of just a gradual?
I don't know. We all have these. There's some aha moments, but it often takes time. It's not like Control Alt Delete.
Right.
Disappeared. Awesome, right? Like sometimes if they're like, wish I could be a robot and just program that right out of me with a little, like a little software bug. It takes work because we have to rewire our brain a little bit and create the new habit with what we want to exist. I think whatever that is, I used to be very negative on myself and expect perfection. And then I created a set of tools to reframe reality. And I don't know, I can occasionally insult myself in my head. Oh, wait. And then what are the list of awesome things about myself? All the great things I'm doing. Why focus on the one tiny mistake when I just did 1,000 things right? All right, learn, right? So you have to be very cognizant that you control your thoughts. Your thoughts don't control you. So you tell yourself what to think instead of being a victim to the negativity. You have to all right, whatever, I don't know what your belief is, but you can actually tell yourself what to think. You're not a victim to the subconscious.
You're programming your own mind.
Yeah. So whatever it is, talk to yourself. Don't listen to your thoughts, talk to yourself. And I can't take credit for all of these ideas are from great books or great mentors I've had. So I want to be clear. This is just me synthesizing information from many sources.
No, I love it. And this has been an incredible conversation.
Well, thank you for your time. And I'm excited about your creator future that will bring together humanity. And I think it's exciting.
Thank you. No, I think it's awesome what you're doing too. And I'll give you the last word here in a second. Eric, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No.
And Kay, I don't know. I always give a chance. Is there anywhere people can go online to look you up?
No, I'm not very online person. I'm at Tech Things in LA. I do deep tech kind of events, put them on sometimes. I did, much to my chagrin, get on LinkedIn. So I suppose you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't post on there, but people tend to tag me on there. So I have a little astronaut. I will comment nicely. I have a little sort of astronaut art facial profile because there's a lot of Kate Lynches out there. So if you put Kate Lynch deep tech, I will be the one that pops up.
Okay, great. And I got one more question, just one more. Because you asked me earlier, what would I do to help humanity? Aside from space, what's one more thing that you would do to help humanity with a magic wand?
All right, right back at me. It's hard to say one thing because a systemic thing. What would be a core solution? I think since AI is going to become sort of the new master in a certain regard, I would love to create more. I don't like the word necessarily ethical or aligned, but intentional AI that is tends towards more benevolence and brings out the best in us, right? That it optimizes ourselves and helps us bring understanding and compassion, and that would be nice.
That sounds awesome. I love that. Well, Kate, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. Yeah, no, I can't wait to share this one. And I always give the guests the last word. You've already given us so many brilliant things, but what's one thing you'd like to end this podcast on? It can be anything you want.
Don't forget to be goofy.
Kate Lynch, thank you.
Always be goofy.
Hi, everyone. Sam Dever, the Sam Dever Podcast here, and I just want to thank you for checking out this episode. To watch and listen to future episodes, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@the Sam Dever Podcast. Thank you so much. See you soon.